before we start our panel, we just wanted to do a brief introduction to who we are, who Student Congress is. So our three co-leaders of Student Congress are here tonight. I'm one of them. I'm Jillian. I am a specialist year student at the Lincoln Center campus. So I'm graduating in May. And I'm going to be one of the moderators for this panel tonight. And we also have Lena, who's going to be our other moderator. So you can introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lena. I'm also a special student at the Lincoln Center, and I'll be graduating in May as well. And Stephanie, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I'm also a co-lead of Student Congress. I am still a generalist student, but I'm getting there. And I graduate in May of 2023.
Yay. And Stephanie's also in the online program. I don't know if you mentioned that. And so we also just wanted to quickly introduce Student Congress. Lena, do you have the slide for that? Awesome. Cool. So we are an active network of Fordham GSS students. We seek to bridge all of Fordham's many different campuses, the online program, Westchester, Lincoln Center, and Malloy, and Rose Hill. We want to develop a strong sense of community and uplift student voices and support student interests. We seek to provide mutual support, strengthen professional development, build partnerships between peers and administration, and we value leadership, diversity, advocacy, and community engagement. I'm also going to drop our Student Congress one sheet which is like our info sheet in the chat, so that any of you that this is your first Student Congress event that you're attending, you can read a bit more about what we do, and you can also find our website, and that has our calendar, which has all of our events with Zoom links, and you can also find our social media through that info sheet as well, and our email address. We really welcome you to join us for any of our meetings. We're always looking for more students. And actually, I'm also going to drop we have our elections coming up. So we're really, really trying to get any continuing students who are going to be students at GSS next year. We would love for you to run in our elections. The intention to run form is due this Friday, April 15th. So I'm going to drop that in the chat as well. And we highly encourage students to fill that out, be in leadership for Student Congress. So Lena, would you want to start introducing the panelists?
Sure, yes. I'm just going to share my screen again. Thank you guys for joining us once again. We have 5 amazing panelists this evening. The first person I'm going to introduce is Janisha Metcalf, and I'm going to go ahead and read her bio. Give me 1 second. I have to figure out how to do this thing. Okay, there we go. Okay, so Genisha is a DEI and social impact strategist, specializing in diversity and inclusion leadership training and building in institutional partnership. She began her career in child welfare services with focusing on training. Give me 1 second. With a focus on training, community engagement, and behavioral health counseling. She is a founder of creating our own legacy, Cool Kids, a nonprofit organization that engages youth and young adults of color in community service. Janisha holds a BA in psychology from Temple University and an MSW from Fordham, where she also serves as an adjunct professor and a course developer as well. Prior to transitioning to consultant, Janisha had held several leadership roles. As the head of campaigns for DoSomething.org, she led programmatic strategy for the largest tech company exclusively for young people and social change. She also served as the director of corporate and community relations for the Utica College Accelerated Nursing Program. She led community engagement, alumni relations, and institutional partnership strategy for the New York City metro area. And our next panelist is Jason Acosta. And Jason is a proud native of the South Bronx, yay, and a macro social worker who's on a mission to shift the narrative and has dedicated his social work career to dismantling oppressive systems. He currently works for the New York City Department of Education as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist, where he leads the DEI and anti-racist efforts across central offices. He's an adjunct instructor at the Hunter College of Education, where he teaches a course titled Intro to Urban Education. Jason is also the founder of We Shift the Culture LLC and the co-founder of Life from the Bronx, a lifestyle brand that celebrates Bronx creatives and change makers. He's also the co-founder of the inaugural All the Way Bronx Summits and events that elevates the creative genius of the Bronx community. And our third panelist is Cara Byron. Cara recently joined the Vets as their strategic partnership and marketing operations manager. She works cross-functionally in a role that spans from project management and brand activation to partnerships, talent, and social impact. Cara received a BA in psychology from the University of Southern California and an MSW from Fordham in 2019. It was Cara's unique life experience as a caretaker to her father from 2015 to 2020 that led her to seek an entrepreneurial endeavor in the areas of health, wellness, and tech. During her time as her father's primary caretaker, Cara built and managed a private duty nursing company with over 40 ER and ICU nurses and technicians. Not only was this developed for her own father, but for other patients within the neurodegenerative diseases in the New York tri-state area. Cara's second biggest accomplishment thus far, next to the care and commitment to her father, was delivering the 2019 student commencement speech at Fordham GSS graduation. She has established a passion project called Making Meaningful Moments, where she curates and designs special experiences and moments for people and their loved ones to improve quality of life. Jillian, do you want to continue the introduction?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, next slide.
Next slide. 1 second. Okay. This is not as easy as I thought it would be. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay. There we go. Okay.
Thanks. So our next panelist is Hannah Babis, who graduated in 2021. Hannah graduated from, well, I said that, in 2021 with her MSW in public policy concentration. She was nominated for the Dr. Peter B. Vaughn NASW Student Award for her commitment to social work values. Hannah currently works in local government administration in State College, Pennsylvania. She was recently selected as a Presidential Management Fellow finalist for 2022. She strives to continue her career in government and hopes to make an impact in the development of efficient and equitable policies that improve the lives of individuals and communities. And we go to Shiriqua, yay. Our final panelist is Shiriqua Hampton. Shiriqua received both master's and bachelor's degrees in social work with a minor in psychology at Fordham. She graduated in 2021 with the St. Peter Claver Award and continues to be an active part of the GSS community as a member of the Action Committee for Racial and Social Justice and the Black Alumni Caucus. As a former co-leader of Student Congress, Shiriqua provides guidance and support to the organization whenever she can. Currently, Shiriqua works in the community mental health field, where she fulfills several roles, including consultant, facilitator, and program and project developer. Shiriqua also serves as a board member of a permanent supportive housing nonprofit, and she volunteers to facilitate peer groups for fellow military veterans. So we're super excited to have all these panelists here and to be hosting our first alumni panel. Just wanted to mention a bit about like the structure of the event. So panelists can feel free to answer any question to which they would like to contribute. Lena and I and Student Congress have come up with a set of questions, so we're going to start with those. And we're just going to kind of leave it as an open conversation. So panelists can feel free to respond, or you don't have to respond to every question. That's fine too. We will ask our prepared questions until 8 o'clock and then stop to turn it over to audience Q&A. If the audience members would like to put questions in the chat now, you are more than welcome to, and we'll get to them during the Q&A, or at that time at 8 o'clock, you could also unmute to ask your question. So let's jump into the questions. So our first question is just sort of a general one. How did you end up on the career path that you are on today?
I could jump in. This is kind of easy for me to answer. So what's up, y'all? Jason Acosta again. For me, a lot of this, and I'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but a lot of this really just stems from my personal upbringing. So as you saw in my bio, grew up in the South Bronx, experienced a lot of different inequities growing up, and I had a lot of questions. So just like moving around, changing schools, going to schools that had metal detectors, gates on the windows, peers not graduating at high rates, I wanted to know what was going on, but I never had the language to call it out or call out what I was experiencing. And so as I started to kind of engage with these questions myself and self-reflect, I started to really unpack like a lot of what I was just feeling at a young age, like in high school. And then when I went away to college, I like went around different majors, tried different majors. The social work was always the thing that I felt like I understood most, and it helped me to answer a lot of the questions that I had growing up, just about everything that I was experiencing in my community and my life. And so I got my bachelor's in social work and my master's. And so when I was studying social work, I remember my intro to social work class, and this professor ended up being my favorite professor, but she wouldn't always touch on the things that I wanted answers to, but gave me resources to go find those answers on my own. And so I wanted to know things like, what does it mean to identify as Latino versus Hispanic? I wanted to know like why there was no access to job opportunities, or like we didn't learn about specialized high schools and some other things when I was in middle school. Why didn't we have social workers that were like effective, right? Like what was just going on? And so as I learned about this, it just lit a fire behind me. Growing up in my community, everyone always said, when you graduate high school, go to college and don't come back. Like there's nothing here for you. So that's what I believed and internalized. And then once I learned about all of this other stuff that answered my questions, I came back to the Bronx. And so now you see, just from my bio, I'm pretty involved with what's happening. But I just felt like I needed to figure out how to come back and make an impact with a particular focus on Black and brown people who come from my community, like period. That's just why I do this work. And so through that, it led me to just doing all the different things that I'll do that I'll talk about, whether it's through like my work at the DOE, my work as an entrepreneur, curriculum writing, research, whatever it is. It's really, really with a huge focus on the Black and brown community. And I'll pause there.
And to follow up, it's really similar for me. When I first started out, I always thought I wanted to be a psychologist, but then I'm like, I need something more hands-on and community oriented. So I learned about social work, and my sister, she doesn't have a social work degree, but she's a social worker. That's a whole thing. So just understanding like which degree would help me do the community work that I want to do and get paid to do it. So when you talk about social work, and especially in New York, Fordham comes up. So I'm like, I have to be there. So I did all that. And most recently, I got an offer, or I accepted an offer as a family functional therapist. And that came from the Fordham, like they have a job listing thing that they send out to people. So that came from Fordham. And before that, I was doing a relationship. I was like a relationship wellness consultant for this app that's rolling out for millennials. So I found that on Twitter. So I basically just look at all the things I want to do in my community and then figure out, okay, what credentials would get me here and get me the most money. And I know that's a big thing in social work too, where you go into it because you want to make a purpose, and like you have a purpose, is purpose driven work and not profit. But I realized with a macro level MSW that has like more the not only organizational leadership roles that I'm really into in government policy stuff, but it's the with that executive leadership role, it's like a nicer paycheck. So basically also with the MSW, I'm just like finding different ways to do what I love, but also connect it, like pretty much connect academia and the community. So I think MSW or social work, the social work field is the perfect blend of that.
I love hearing the stories. I forgot I was a panelist. I was just sitting and listening and enjoying the conversation. But for me, my work that I started my career doing in foster care in the South Bronx over 12 years ago is very different from what I do today in many ways, but it's also very similar in the sense that it's rooted in my core values of equity, of moving communities forward, and providing resources and support. So I've been working in tech since 2018, first starting out with contract roles, doing DEI consulting and training, and then working for a tech-based nonprofit called DoSomething.org, leading a global campaign strategy for social issue campaigns. And now I'm the program manager for the Black Community Nonprofit Fund, which brings together 250 Black-led nonprofits in 20 different cities. But when I first started my career, I was a social worker, right? I was doing clinical work. I was working in the South Bronx. And I just could sense that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I cared, there were systems in place that were not going to move unless we had people who understood boots on the ground, direct service, and understood administration and philanthropy and where money came from, right? And so if you are on this call and you don't know who's on the board of the nonprofit you work for, if you don't know how much of your funding is private versus contract government grants versus foundations, right? Those are the things that make exceptional social workers, because our work is so complex and so deep rooted in oppression and dismantling racism and understanding cultural responsive practice, that in order for us to be effective, we have to understand things from top to bottom. So that's what really got me interested and invested in macro practice social work and showing up to places that were not asking for social workers, right? My last couple of jobs did not advertise and say, we need an MSW. Doing things like being the director of corporate and community relations for Utica College, I realized, to Jason's point, there was a lack of funding for Hispanic nurses in the community. How can you have hospitals in Mott Haven, in Co-op City, in parts of the Bronx, that you don't have the nursing staff reflecting the community? So what does a social worker do? You see the opportunity and you create a nursing student scholarship, right? Working at City Year, I was tasked with revamping our corporate partnerships program. So bringing companies like Starbucks or Comcast into communities in Harlem and the Bronx and East New York and Brooklyn, where I'm from, and showing them the need in the community, not in a way that robs people of their dignity and parades them around, but in a way that showcases that these inequities are unacceptable, and we are holding companies and institutions accountable for doing their part and helping to move communities forward, right? It's not a handout, it's doing your part. So for me, that has always been the key to my career in social work, is I'm always looking for the opportunity to help communities, particularly communities of color, women and girls, think about their next steps and think about ways to progress forward. in this moment right now, for me, that's tech, right? We're talking at my company about the metaverse. We're talking about AR and VR. We're talking about the jobs of the future. We're talking about 125,000 jobs by 2025 that are remote based, that require some technical skills, right? Not all coding and engineering, but a mindset shift in terms of thinking from a UX design perspective or a tech perspective. So that's what I see as being social work right now, the digital divide. If you're not online, if you don't have access to these resources, you can't really do much right now, right? So that's what it's been for me, is like serve where most needed and identify social issues and then do my part as a social worker.
Yeah, going off of that, I kind of feel like I had a similar transition from micro to macro. I started off doing direct service work, working primarily with clients on the autism spectrum. Then after that, I was teaching for a while. And I really felt like, as much as I loved working directly with people, there were all these systems in place that were putting up these barriers, and that was what needed to change, right? Like, I felt like you could only do so much as a direct service worker, and really, like, the issues were trickling down from these big systems and these policies. So that is really what inspired me to go back and get my MSW. And specifically, I knew I wanted to kind of focus in on policy. And, you know, I think Fordham has a great like specialization courses in policy. And recently I've transitioned into local government. I'm interested in going into federal government too in the future. And yeah, I definitely think I'm happy with the transition. I feel like I'm making more of the impact that I wanted to be when I was in direct service work. And yeah, that's.
I will say, first of all, I'm so happy to be here. I think it's an amazing opportunity that Student Congress has put on. When I was in grad school and I went straight from undergrad, I kind of led this initiative called LEAP, Lead, Empower, Act with Purpose. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar, but the premise around it was really to create these types of networking opportunities and relationships between not only the students in the program, but also alumni, other people in the profession, so that we can all learn about what we're doing and to seek other opportunities that we might not be learning about in the classroom. And that kind of led me to just such an interesting journey, and eventually where I am today, which was the initial question. My journey since grad school has been very, very unique, and definitely non-traditional. And so with that, though, I really deeply believe that everything I learned in my education at Fordham has allowed me to get through and kind of move on to the next transition. Specifically, after grad school, I was my father's primary caretaker for about 5 years. And so everything that you learn in the program on a clinical level, which is what my internships were, they were clinical. I kind of took that right into the family. So you learn obviously everything from family dynamics, impact of stress and trauma. We talk a lot about strengths-based resilience and perspective and how to live life, and just really taking everything I learned in school, but doing it in a unique manner. Most times you're doing it with clients in a clinical setting if you're a therapist, but I really had to learn the boundary between taking what I knew from school and applying it actually to my personal life, while also starting and managing a business in healthcare where you're learning about communication styles with others in different professions, doctors and nurses and family members and people facilitating. And so my social work background was deeply ingrained in me through that process. Obviously, we talk a lot about death and dying in a master's social work program and grieving, and that is definitely a part of this process. And then, interestingly, I kind of went on a consulting entrepreneurial journey afterwards. and got involved in a lot of different types of projects where I got to touch on social impact and marketing and how to create awareness about products and services that are really great. And just recently, about a month ago, I accepted this job at a vet tech company, which I never thought I would be a part of a veterinary tech company, but I really love their mission. I'm a huge pet lover. I think pets make a huge impact in people's lives, more than you would ever imagine. And we focus a lot on vets first, happy vets make happy pets, and how it's not really known, but there's huge rates of burnout and compassion fatigue in the industry. And it's all about supporting them so that they in turn can support our fur babies, if you will. And it also makes people happier and quality of lives happier. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today, weaving through, for sure, my education and social work in all aspects, even though they have all been very different.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I think it's great that we have such a diverse array of panelists who have such diverse backgrounds. I think that that's just really great to see. I think that some of our videos are getting pinned. Oh, okay, that's good. But yeah, like I was saying, it's awesome to hear about all of your journeys and kind of all the different positions that you've held and moving from micro to macro. I think it's really interesting to hear. So you all kind of touched on our next question a little bit, but maybe you could add a little bit more. We wanted to ask, did you have a career prior to getting your MSW? And in addition, how did you combine the previous career experience with your social work career? How did you incorporate your prior career into your resume? Like maybe when you first did the career change? And did employers ask you about your career transition?
For me, I'm a Marine veteran, so I feel like as a Black woman and a Marine veteran with a social work background, people just kind of throw jobs at me because the veteran population is one that's like has so many different levels to it, as far as like just mental health and homelessness and dealing with the families who have to support the veterans and policies about who can join the military, who can be what orientation. So there's always just so much to do that everyone's like, oh, hey, I know somebody. So I was really fortunate in that way. And when it comes to just getting opportunities that I never really thought I would be able to get. Speaking of tech, I thought of when I was on Twitter, I got introduced to therapists in tech, and they have like a whole Slack group, and they post jobs and stuff. And there's also opportunities for like if people want to get into writing, because I know publishing is a big thing for a lot of people. So there's a bunch of different opportunities for that. And it really went with my other career of, writing and just doing more stuff along peer support. So that's really how I was able to combine everything. And then with my my internships, I interned and did work study in the veteran military service space, but I also interned with women who are getting out of Rikers, and I was able to create a peer group. So again, they trusted me to create a peer group and do a program because they're like, you're a veteran and you're a student Congress co-lead. So I know you know about organizational leadership and things like that. And just straight up asking and creating my own job if there wasn't one. Just like, oh, hey, I noticed you don't have this. Have you considered that? And just really putting myself out there. That's just how I'm able to combine all my experiences. So like if I have an experience with like a dance and chat program, I'll talk to the veterans, like the VA people who are trying to do something recreational for veterans. And I'm like, hey, I can do a dance and chat program for veterans. And they're like, okay. And then I'll meet somebody there and I'll network with them. And then I'll go to the next organization or agency. And that's really how I've built my resume and reputation.
Yeah, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about like building your resume. I've recently been like applying to a lot of jobs. And I recently got some like insight on this. I mean, I think it's really important to keep like a master resume that could be like very, very, very long, just all of your work experiences that you've ever had. And then depending on the job that you're applying for, just pull from that and put it together from those. But I guess when I was applying to like local government jobs and policy jobs, I was making this really like targeted resume where I would just put like literally past policy stuff I've done, research stuff. And I really kind of omitted a lot of the direct service work that I had done years prior. But I recently submitted a resume that I kind of included a little bit of the direct service work that I was talking about before, and ended up having like a personal connection with the person who was interviewing me. And so my point to this is that you never know, be selective with what you put, on each job, but also if there's something that doesn't feel like 100% related, but you can kind of tie it in, it doesn't hurt to put it on if you're applying for a job, because you never know like what somebody else's personal experience would be, or if they have a connection to that. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I'm happy to jump. Was someone gonna?
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm happy to just jump in really quickly. I've always kind of stayed around like social work, direct service. Even today, where I'm doing such large scale work, I'm still kind of like on the ground, right? Doing some micro stuff. And so I started out, obviously when you intern, right? That's where you most of social work, they push you towards clinical settings, right? So you're working across different populations. So I worked with youth and foster care, addictions, probation, like all of the above. I knew I wasn't going to do clinical work from undergrad. That was like, I already knew that. I already knew I wanted to figure out large scale impact in education. I just didn't know how I was going to get there at the time. So my first job, while I was at Fordham, I was working full time for a nonprofit doing college access work with young people really trying to figure out how we can establish pathways to post-secondary, whatever, right? Career, education, et cetera. And then I knew that was pretty limiting. And I didn't really enjoy it. So I started to kind of figure out like, what I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, right? So I just kind of was taking some jobs in the same area, like higher ed. I was in higher ed for a little while, and then I ended up at the Department of Education, where I've been going almost on 5 years now. And then I'm noticing right now that politics probably isn't going to be for me. I'll come back to that in a second. But the one thing that has stayed consistent throughout is like young people have always been like high school age youth for the most part, maybe college youth have always been around my career. And now I'm in a position where in my current job, I'm not doing the direct work, but I have my own consulting business where I get to I'm doing a research project right now and spend a lot of time with young people. I'll talk about this later on, but we're looking at some work around hip hop therapy for youth in foster care. And so I spent a lot of time with them. I was just in Brownsville with some students who were at an alternative high school recently. And so they're written off by most people. And so I still get to do that type of work on the ground separately. For me, it just helps me stay grounded. And the one thing that I've learned throughout my career and all the work that I'm doing, whether again through research, I just launched a creative agency, right? And we have a huge summit coming up, and I'll talk about that in a second. But like through all of this, for me, the mission has always been the same: opportunities for Black and Brown folks, and work that centers identity and healing. Those things through everything. So because of those things, I've finally now today, I've kind of figured out how I can continue to do this on both the macro and micro level, which I think is exciting for me because of my own personal experiences. Like I get to sit at the board, right? I'm on boards for organizations, get to sit at the table with all these white folks, right? Who are filthy rich and share my voice for the people, right? I also get to be in the middle of the hood with young people doing speaking engagements and building with them, right? Like I get that mix. So, and the reason I do it is so I never get like big headed, right? Because financially, I'm doing okay as a social worker, right? I'm in a good place in my career and I'm fairly young. And so I think for me to stay grounded, I got to stay close to the people. So with all of that, I'm in a place today where I just want to do what I enjoy. And one of the biggest pieces of advice I was given in that college access job I started at was, if you work hard and you're passionate about what you do, the money will come. So there's this concept in social work that like, you know, you don't do this work to make money. It's true. Most social workers probably don't make a lot of money, but I never like accepted that. That wasn't going to be me. I would sit in class and I'm like, nah, y'all don't know who I am. I was hearing this since freshman year in undergrad. I was like, y'all bugging if you think I'm about to go through all this school and make $55,000. I'm not doing that. No shade to anybody in that position, right? Because we all got to start somewhere. I wasn't making no money in the beginning, but I'm like, yo, that's not what I do. But I never went to a job for money. Never. Like I never said I'm gonna go here because it's $100,000 job. I literally just have been following my passion and putting the building blocks together as I went, and try to stay true and authentic to who I am throughout the entire process. What I'm learning, and I'm gonna shut up here because I don't want to take up too much time, is that through this process, people will invest in you because of who you are. So like these narratives and ideas that we have to, you know, conform to dominant structures that tell us how to behave and act in corporate settings or in job settings. I've always rejected those notions. And I'm learning that staying true to who I am, even though it's extremely hard in these settings, has allowed me to get to where I'm at today and do the things that I want to do and serve the people the way I want to serve them without having to get permission from anybody to do it, other than the people that's on the ground with me, right? And so through this summit, I'm raising money right now. Like Fordham is actually, shout out to them, a sponsor, right? And this is my first, like in this entrepreneurial space of raising money and getting investments. I'm doing this in the creative field where we're highlighting fashion, tech, finance, and entrepreneurship for people in the Bronx who may not get that information if I wasn't putting it together, right? At the same time, I have a consulting business, which is different, where I get to write curriculum that's being taught in schools right now. I get to do this research that I'm doing on hip hop therapy. I get to do all those things. And so I'm saying all this to say, like, I didn't know I was going to be here with my first job in college access. But what I did know is that I wanted to stay true to my passion throughout. And through it all, I've been able to figure out what I want to do and how I want to do it, knowing that I'm going straight into entrepreneurship probably in the next few years, because I know politics, government, I see what happens at the top and it ain't for me. I'm way too authentic for what they need and want in these spaces. And I just refuse to like have to be a part of somebody's political agenda.
Jason, I love what you said about just like the passion in you and the fire in you. I think that the beauty of this just program and being a social worker and the education that we got, I feel like that is what connects all of us, is that we do have this burning passion. One thing I will say is that for me personally, just going from being a primary caretaker and then dipping my toes in the entrepreneurial world in a very non-conventional way, it can also be very daunting when you don't know exactly what you want to do, or you don't know the type of population you necessarily want to work with, or have that one goal in where you want to be in the next 2 to 5 years. So it kind of puts you in a position of, okay, well, how do you kind of go about this and go get your next job? Or how do you create a resume that caters to this specific workplace or environment that maybe you don't have prior experience to? Well, what I found in my process is that social work is has a holistic lens where we have a unique ability to apply that to pretty much anything. And a lot of people don't even know what we do. And I vividly remember sitting, having a seat at the table, Jason, Dean McPhee was there and other people were there. And it was a lot of lawyers and finance people, and then me, like the youngest in the room by 20 years. And Dean McPhee looked at me and she was like, can you elaborate on what we do as social workers? And after, giving a 2-minute overview, these really, renowned people in New York City were like, oh my God, I can't believe I never knew what social workers really do. And you can work in any industry across all sectors. And so what I found to be the most powerful tool for me is just the power of networking, because I can write up a 1-page resume and my paper can read one thing. And this did happen to me. In fact, after my dad passed away, I was applying to a lot of jobs. I was applying right on their online job portals, and I was getting rejected from all of them. And it wasn't until I started reaching out to people on LinkedIn, connecting with people from my grad school, and just finding, people to have conversations and getting my foot in the door with an introduction. Most people, when they look at my piece of paper 2 years ago, they would be like, oh, well, this doesn't really apply here. But when I have a conversation with them and I'm able to connect with them on a personal level of my experience and what I've been through and what I can bring to the table, they do give me a shot and they are interested in, moving me to the next round or continuing the conversation. So I guess my piece of advice here is to not be down on yourself, and to try to create a resume that's kind of like a life resume that's really holistic, and to make a goal for yourself. If you are in the job searching phase, maybe make a goal for yourself to connect with 2 to 3 new people every single week and set up conversations for yourself. Because I feel like maybe, I don't know, back a few years ago, I felt like a lot of people judged you having a conversation or your foot in the door or trying to reach out to people to hear about their company. Well, that is how you move along in life. You connect with people on a human level, you talk to them. So I stand by that. I think it's the most powerful tool. Again, it's like human interaction 100%. And I think that should be incorporated into every single job process, because it can lead you to unexpected places, and to also just meet new people bringing into your life. So.
Yeah, that was the advice so far has been really good. I just want to add a couple of things. One is you have to professionalize your social work journey. And what I mean by that is there are people who think social work just means direct service. They think it just means working in foster care or giving out food stamps or benefits. What you bring to the table, how you show up, how you think, how you interact with people, the questions you raise, the things that you determine are non-negotiables in terms of how you treat clients, how clients treat you, et cetera, are how they will define you as a career professional and ultimately a social worker. What I find, and I forgot to mention, I teach in the program, I designed the advanced practice with organizations and communities course in the online a few years ago. I've been teaching here for about 5 years. So this isn't just my experience, it's also experience of working with students for several years who are in the MSW program at Fordham. It's not going to come to you, right? Like there's this misconception that if you work super hard and you're passionate and you care, you go from direct service to director to executive director to whatever the path is. What happens more often than not is you get the job you plan for, you prepare for, or the one you're ready for. So the common thread that everyone talked about is even if they didn't directly set out to be in their current position, they were prepared. And getting prepared can mean a lot of different things, right? And it comes from being honest. So for example, I was working for an organization called City Year. I was 4 years into my career, or maybe 5 years into my career at that point. I already had the job. I was already fundraising, but I needed to understand how to go from raising $1 million to $10 million. I wanted to scale up my skills. So what did I do? I enrolled myself in a grant writing class at Hunter College. You have to prepare yourself for the next level. No one is going to come to you just because you have the credential, whether it's an L, whether it's a C, whatever the letters are, the alphabet after your name. You have to prepare yourself for your next role. At a different job as head of campaigns, leading a team of 8, leading global strategy. I never led global strategy before. They didn't know that. I got an executive coach because I needed to understand executive presence. I needed to understand when I was creating decks and one-pagers for C-suite folks and talking to the head of corporate social responsibility, people who run JetBlue or run these Fortune 100 companies, I needed to be prepared, right? And now being in tech, I spend a lot of my time navigating what is the metaverse? What are the next steps? How do I bring Black-led nonprofits at Meta on board with all of the new technologies that we have coming down the pipeline as we enter V3 of the internet and this mobile first world, right? So I just say all of that to say, invest in yourself, whether that means getting your resume professionally done. I've done that. Whether it means getting a job coach, I've done that. Getting an executive coach, right? It depends on what scale you want to play at. If you want to be, like hospital social worker number 45, and I'm not saying that in a disparaging way, I'm just saying like where there's many opportunities, those are not necessarily your next steps, right? But my mentor, who is the director of diversity and inclusion for Netflix, who has an MSW, had to position and prepare herself in a different way to play at that level. So I think you need to, even if you don't know exactly where you want to go, the name of the company, the job title, my last 4 job titles have been completely made up. No one has had this job before me. There's no other Black community nonprofit fund program manager. There's no other director of corporate and community relations, right? So we were making it up on the fly. But it's that preparedness and that understanding of by year 1, by year 3, by year 5, I want to have X impact. I want to make X amount of money. I hope we get into the money conversation later because I have lots to say about that. But really grounding yourself in what your broader goals are and laddering up to that. And the last thing I will say on the networking piece, because this is like the thing that frustrates me to no end, please network correctly. Don't waste your time and don't waste other people's time. I've had plenty of information sessions that you could have looked on Glassdoor, you could have gotten the information elsewhere. What you should be looking for out of these kinds of conversations is a candid and transparent understanding of the culture of the company, not something you can read somewhere else. How do I translate my skills as a social worker into this space? When you look at my resume, right, if you're meeting with someone, what value add do you believe I would bring to this company? Here's what I think I bring. I'm curious if there are any gaps in service delivery or gaps in strategy that you think I have a unique skill set that can fill, right? Those are the questions you center around when you're talking to people. Talking about cats and dogs and kids and coffee and all of those things, fun, love it. But I think if we're being honest, what it has done when I've had those conversations, I walk away thinking, wow, that was a lovely person, but not necessarily the person I want to hire or introduce to an opportunity, right? So just make sure that when you are networking, you have a goal in mind, and even if that goal is, I am just in the figuring out stage of whether I'm deciding if this is even the right sector for me or right fit for me. Can you offer me some guidance on how you landed in this position, right? So you don't have to have the answers. That's not what I'm saying, but you do need to have direction when you're going into these conversations.
I know we got to move on. I just want to add one quick thing based on that. Utilize LinkedIn too. If there's like a place you want to work at, find somebody that works there. You can message them, email them. People are down to have conversations. Like people reach out to me all the time, and I'm like, and I'll talk to them just off strength of the love. I'm like, yo, let's connect. I'll give you 30 minutes. I got 30 minutes, especially if it's a person of color, for me. And so utilize LinkedIn and find somebody. And the other thing I would say is around informational interviews really quickly. I spent like my whole early career. I mean, I think I'm still pretty early in my career, but like right out of college, I spent all that time meeting with people that I wanted to learn from. I was like, yo, I don't want anything from you. Just give me advice, some words of wisdom and guidance. Tell me your story, 30 minutes, I'm in and out of your face. And then I'll try to maintain that relationship. But like, I lean on that so much. Like literally before doing any consulting work, I hit the big homie up. I'm like, yo, I got my first project. I don't even know how to negotiate this contract. I know how to negotiate contracts at work because we got a lot of money. This is what I do, right? But for myself, I was selling myself short, and I had to go talk to somebody about it because I didn't know how to have that type of conversation initially for my own work, right? It's my first big project. I'm like, yo, I don't know how much to charge. So all of those things, utilize your mentors, do those informational interviews, despite where, it doesn't matter where you want to go, find somebody there and connect with them.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Just following up what you said, Jason, our conversations about money and salary. Our next question is, could you give us some tips on like salary negotiation and obtaining promotions in like the social work job settings, how to go about that and navigate that as newly graduates from grad school?
I'm ready.
Yes, let's go.
You need 3 things: a mentor, a sponsor, and a coach. I'm going to tell you the difference. When I'm talking to my mentor about salary negotiations, etc., they're helping me with that preparedness piece, right? How do you get that offer letter? And I also have a consulting business. So similar to Jason, what do I charge this client, right? How do I know? I don't know what to charge the Board of Ed in Connecticut. No idea. So you want to make sure you have a mentor to build your muscle and your comfort, especially depending on what your current relationship is to money, right? I grew up in East New York, single parent household. There wasn't a lot of money talk. There wasn't a lot of career, right? People had jobs and worked super hard, but my family's idea is like, get a good pension, get a good city job, and that's that. So I already knew that I needed outside sources to help me navigate, and I needed to say the words. I needed people who, in a safe, supportive space, I could say, I think this is what I should be making. And they could be like, girl, no, or yes, or that's too much, or what is that rooted in, right? And I think the clearer you get, salary is information, it's data. So we have to demystify it, right? You have to find people who are willing to talk openly about money. And being a hiring manager, I've seen the gender gap, right? 2 people, similar skills. The male person interviewing asked for $20,000 more. I had it in my budget and I gave it to him, right? You have to understand the market and negotiate for yourself, right? So that's what your mentor is for. What your coach is for is helping you navigate from opportunity to opportunity, right? So I had a mentee that I was working with, doing some coaching with, and she realized that she was at a director. It's called a dry promotion, when you're promoted without any comp, right? So I was the associate director, I was making 60K, and now I'm the director and I'm still making 60K, right? You have to be able to spin up that narrative to say, I'm doing 20% more work, I've engaged 45% more families. Like, know the data behind what you bring to the table. I cannot stress that enough. In my current role, what I'm able to do is see how I work cross-functionally and how much money it saves the company, right? If I'm doing 20%, 30%, 40% of 3 different roles baked out into one, you're training less people. That's the conversation. And the last part is getting a sponsor, getting someone who's already in those spaces, right? I'm talking about people who have the social capital already to help walk you through getting that offer letter to the finish line. And again, this is rooted in what type of industry you're in and what you're looking for, right? So I know social workers where the conversation is like, my floor is $200,000. That's just, I'm not doing anything below that. And that's because they built up to that. They've been in the sector 10 years. That's just, they're able to play at that level and negotiate at that level. I had a contract that was hard coded working for a previous company where they just had a pay equity leveling where they started people at $500 an hour, right? There was no negotiation. So if you're ever feeling stuck about how do I approach this? How do I ask about this? You can always use that language and framing of saying, I'm just curious if you have a pay transparency or a pay equity policy where you're able to share salary bands prior to the interview process, right? Take the pressure off yourself to give a number. I never, if you don't hear anything else I say, I never give a number first. You want me to come to this job, right? You know what your budget is, right? So you want to make sure that you are taking the pressure off yourself. You're not scared. If you didn't have the skills, you wouldn't be applying for the job. So get what you're worth by being confident, by talking to people openly about salary, and truly understanding your sector. And there's so many resources. Check the 990 form and see what people are getting paid if you work in nonprofit. If you work in government, like it's even easier, right? There's seethroughgovernment.com. If you're really stuck, look at comparable jobs in neighboring states. Look at other places that have pay transparency policies and use that as your base, right? That way, if they ever push back, you have that in your back pocket, right? I was walking around with literal job descriptions, like a folder of job descriptions, just in case there was any contention around the salary piece, to be able to say, well, these 4 companies or these 5 companies or these 5 agencies, this is what they're paying. And the last thing I'll share is also know the law in your state and policies. There's actually some really interesting pay transparency work that you'll see happening and taking shape in New York. And particularly if you look at a lot of job postings due to a Fair Pay Act in Colorado, they have to post at least what that job is in the state of Colorado. But we live in the future. All jobs are on the internet, or most jobs are on the internet. So you can see what the comp is relative to other states.
I'll just jump in real quick. You hit on a lot that I was also thinking about too, so I won't reiterate that. But I do think the important piece that I do want to uplift is that if you are working in nonprofit, every organization has to release their taxes. It's public information. You can literally find an organization. I think first Charity Navigator's a site, and then there's another one. You can literally what is it?
GuideStar.
Yes, GuideStar. And you can literally find an organization. It'll tell you their total budget. It'll tell you how much the executive director gets paid. And then you can also look up their 990 tax forms. They have to report, I think if they have more than a certain amount of employees, they have to report the top 10 most highest paid employees there. So for example, if you're going for a job and they're saying you can only get paid $40,000, but their admin budget is X millions of dollars, right? Let's say, and you know the ED is getting paid 400,000. There's an issue, right? There's something there, right? Also knowing I'm not saying this in a way to like justify like accepting a low pay, but you also gotta be there, right? I'm not gonna give you $100,000 and your work and your experience and what you've done does not add up to that. The other thing I will say to that is think about your social impact, right? So like a lot of times, we might have our job and we may volunteer somewhere else and spend X amount of time doing that. You can actually turn some of that into like a formula for money. Like you can say, here, the social impact is measured. I spent every Saturday in the last 2 months from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. mentoring or working with students at this particular organization or school. You're not getting paid for that, but you can actually put a dollar amount to that and help that also be a part of your conversation. There are formulas for this. We won't get a chance to get deep into that. But it's really leveraging all of that stuff. And then like the last thing I'll say, and then I'll pass it over, is that like, you don't think about the stuff you enjoy. I didn't go to school for communications, right? And I got a podcast now, and I'm trying to create, I'm trying to do some stuff in the creative space. I didn't go to school for that. I went to school for social work, but I can leverage the things that I do in social work in all those different spaces, right? What did I say? Identity and healing is the foundation for everything that I do, right? I want to make sure that we're able to have impact and create opportunity for Black and brown folks. That stays true across everything that I do. And where does that stem from? Social work, right? So if you have interest in these other areas, like, you can build them out. And then lastly, you hear that some of us are consultants. Yo, these corporate companies will pay you crazy money for you to do work with them just because you have that experience already from social work. Most people going into DEI don't have social work background, right? That's the difference. That like, when you're a social worker in that space, you not only have lived experience oftentimes, but you actually have the institutional knowledge and academia behind it. So when you have those things, you become a little bit more of like someone that people want to work with, right? So think about that too. Like, everyone needs social workers. Everybody across all industries, you're needed. They may not know that you're needed, but you're needed, right? Like, you can exist in any industry, as was said earlier.
Yeah, this has all been really great advice. Just to add to it, so I'm currently in my local government job through a fellowship. And the worst advice that I was given was somebody told me around this time last year, don't negotiate your salary, especially because you're going into a fellowship. It's already a fixed amount of money that's been in the approved budget, and like they can't deviate from the budget. So I didn't negotiate my salary, and a lot of my peers who are in this fellowship cohort, like, some people did negotiate, some people didn't. A lot of the people who did got salary increases. So always negotiate, whether it be a paid internship, a fellowship, just always try to negotiate. And the other thing is, if they really can't negotiate your salary, there are other things that you can negotiate with, like professional development opportunities. I've had the opportunity to go, to Portland and Boston on these conferences where these were like amazing networking opportunities. I've like networked with so many people on conferences. I've gotten like job offers on the spot. Anytime you go to a conference, like, just network. It's really great. You will get job opportunities and just other, networking opportunities. It's a great opportunity. So if you can't negotiate your salary, or even if you can, additionally, you should try to negotiate, these are the conferences that I want to go to. I want them to be funded. These are the trainings that I want to attend. Or if trainings come up, is there a reserve fund for trainings that like I'll have the opportunity to get the training that I need to do the job or to do a better job. And then vacation days, sick days, those are negotiable. If you are getting a job offer, you feel like you're not getting enough vacation days, you need to negotiate that up. And then also, I think it never hurts to like right off the bat, what is the opportunity for promotion in this role in the long term or the near term? It's good for them to think that you're thinking about, potentially staying in that organization long term. And honestly, if they give you an answer like there's not, it's probably not necessarily the place you want to be, right? If they're not thinking about their employees' professional development and growth, right? So yeah, there's definitely a lot to negotiating. It's something that I still feel really new at. Honestly, I haven't negotiated my salary in like many of my past jobs, and it's a skill to develop, but it's always do it. You just always try to negotiate if you can.
Yeah, Genisha, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I also wanted to add something because I realized a lot of folks are still early career, and I define early career as 3 to 5 years post MSW. The year after I graduated, I actually took a pay cut because I changed sectors. So I left working for foster care for 5 years into that corporate social responsibility job. And it wasn't, well, at the time it was significant. In retrospect, you know, it's like an $8,000 pay cut. I don't mind sharing that information. But I was promoted within the year, and within 2 years, I doubled my salary. And so I'm just sharing that because we can give you advice from here until next week. Your intuition is your best friend. Every time I've trusted my gut, I've never been wrong, right? So make sure that when you're making decisions, right? Like if an organization is like, we can't pay you X because this position is grant funded, but in 6 months, a director level position is opening up, or we might be launching a new site, etc. Listen, like really listen to what the potential opportunities are. Money and value and compensation are important. I'm a firm believer in that and being paid your worth, but I'm also a believer in understanding opportunities in the long run and being critically aware of what it means to sometimes take a step back and think about what the opportunity might be, right? I was the only social worker there. I was front and center with Fortune 100 companies, right? It was a really pivotal role that changed my career. Had I said, you know, for $8,000, I'm gonna stay where I'm at and work my way up, who knows where I might be, right? So I just wanna offer that because you're gonna run into different circumstances. And while you should absolutely negotiate and know your worth, I just also wanted to share an example of the other side of the spectrum, where they truly were grant funded and unable to do it, but held true to their promises to me and helped to jumpstart my career.
Yeah. Thank you. This is a very interesting conversation. I think one of the things as like fresh graduates is usually most of the time, we all have experiences as with just internships. I think self-sabotage with the case of, it's just intern experience. So that kind of holds us back with wanting to like call a certain amount of money for employees to pay us. I was just telling my fellow colleagues this evening, and this is a timely conversation. I got a job interview this evening, and what you said, Genisha, the interviewer asked me, what is your, what salary are you looking to get? And I wish we had this conversation before that interview, because I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to mention a salary before she said something, but, I called an amount, and then she's like, okay, good. That's within our budget. And I realized that I shot myself in the foot, because I could have gotten more. I can get more in this case because I don't know what her budget is or whatever the case might be. So in this case, just kickstarting our audience questions, because it's 8:11 and we just want to move to open the floor to the audience to ask questions. And I just want to open that floor, and starting with this question: how am I able to fix this case? Because this is like four hours before now, because this happened at like 4 p.m. How can I fix this? Because I don't know how to fix that situation. In this case, what can I do to like remake that situation, see what I can get the most out of that job, and if it's fixable in this case.
Did you accept the offer? Like you have a offer in writing?
No.
Okay, so then there's still room to negotiate. That's number one. And number two, if you are going to give a number, you always give a range, right? Of like, I'm looking for something in the 50 to 70,000 rate, or, whatever it is. I think it really depends on how formal the conversation was, right? And where you landed. So if the last thing was, I'm really excited about this opportunity, I'd love to think about it, that puts you in a different spot than a hard-coded, like, I'll send you your offer letter tomorrow, right? And even with being sent an offer letter, you still have room to negotiate. You still have time to negotiate. Now, keep in mind that generally speaking, somewhere between 15 to 20% of the number that they've given you is standard, right? So like, just for the sake of math, if they've offered you $80,000, you going in to say, actually, I was hoping to make 160 is like crazy. You know, you can't double the amount. But I would say, like, you still within that 15 to 20% range can have some room to negotiate. And, you know, and just say, like, I'm really excited about this opportunity. I'm so happy that this is a great starting point for us to start to think about comp and benefits and other things. And you can also just add in that when you get the salary letter, it'll tell you like all of your benefits together, right? So that gives you some more negotiating room as well. One of the things for me, I'm on my husband's insurance. I don't, you know, like this company was like, we have health insurance. I'm like, I got that. I want money. What else y'all offering, right? So really look in a very detailed way at what they're offering you and negotiate from there. But if you didn't sign anything, there's still space. That's my point of view.
The important thing about that healthcare piece, though, is that that's factored into the into salary of their budgets, right? So let's say like I'm offering you $60,000, like I'm actually probably paying $100,000 for your actual salary because it includes health and benefits. So what she just said is like, if you're on somebody else's health insurance, yeah, you could probably be like, no, I want the 100,000, right? Like, so that's important to keep in mind too.
Okay, I didn't even know that. Thank you guys. So we're just gonna open it up to everyone. If you have questions, you could just raise your hand and ask the panelists questions that you have down for them. And you could also put the questions in the chat. We'll monitor the chat and read them out to the panelists as well.
I had a question. Well, first of all, I just want to say that, wow, everybody, A game, A game, A game. Feel very grateful to count myself among the Fordham family with you guys. So my question is, like, when you think about your personal relationships, even, I know, Genisha, you were talking about like mentor, sponsor, coach, like all this stuff. I'm just curious how you guys go about, and maybe it's not as methodical, but how do you guys go about like building those personal relationships that enrich you, you know, by default into like in your work life? Like, how do you kind of build those friendships, and have you stayed friends with people from Fordham? Like, do you think about it that way?
Yes. Oh my, I love this question. And so there are a couple of things that are important to me. I've managed a lot of people in my career. So while everyone is always like trying to, you know, find folks who are 1 or 2 or 3 levels above them, I've stayed really connected to folks that I manage, because guess what? Guess who I managed 5 years ago that's now a manager at LinkedIn and thinks that I would be a good fit for a job, right? Guess who's now a director at, you know, X program, and they want to hire me to do a DEI contract. So I would say that keeping authentic connections with folks at all levels is critically important, right? And I don't just mean levels within the company, right? The receptionist, the person in my current role, we get free breakfast, we get free lunch. Do you know how much time I spend with the chefs and the security folks and just everyone, right? Because you really want to create, or at least what's important to me, is an authentic brand as being hardworking, a good person that cares deeply about people and gets stuff done, right? Like, that's my brand, no matter where you know me from, whether it's personal, professional, etc. So that's how I've navigated building those relationships. The other 2 things that I think are important is I have Google alerts on 15 people. These are people that I've either heard of, like on panels. I call them like my mentors in my head, right? I've never met them. We don't have close personal relationships. But the way this has evolved for me is by keeping track of them. When I see the head of corporate social responsibility for BET is getting an award, I can send a note. I heard you were getting X award. Congratulations. I heard you were the keynote for this panel. Congratulations. I was thinking about buying a ticket. Hope to see you soon. And I've actually had people respond and say, oh, I'll put you on my guest list. Please come, right? So think about the ways that you want to stay connected with people. I'm a big holiday card person. My first boss from 2009 still gets a holiday card from me in 2022 because that relationship is important to me, right? And that doesn't necessarily have to be your thing, but you need to find your thing in a world where there's so much noise and so much going on of how you are going to maintain those authentic relationships. And the last thing I'll say is you need to be somewhat strategic about the time you want to invest in those mentor-mentee relationships because they're not one-sided, right? So when people who are C-suite need perspective from a new director, I'm there to give them, that level of support, right? Or they want to understand what's going on in terms of someone who's still teaching in an MSW program, right? So just being prepared to make those relationships more transformational than transactional. And I know I said the last thing was the last thing, but this is the last thing. Be flexible. I would go to yoga with one of my mentors because 8 a.m. was the only time slot she had. And I'm like, I'll take it, right? Or like I have 2 children. After drop off, I'm having coffee with some of the parents who work for companies that one day I might want to work there, right? So it's about fitting it in and having that work-life integration so it doesn't feel so much like networking, right? And then after yoga, it would be like, okay, I have 10 minutes on this train walk. Tell me about this job opportunity. Tell me about what you're interested in. Tell me about what you're curious about in the sector, right? So you'll find your things, but I'm just sharing mine so that it gives you some insight.
Yeah, and I want to add, I was saying
I'm their mentor in my head.
One of my mentors in my head, but also keeping it real about who you are so you can find the right mentor for you. So just because somebody has an MSW doesn't mean they're doing the work that you want to do. So being able to say, I love hip hop, I love Black women, I'm here for Black women veterans, that means something to certain people. And because not everybody is in that, once they see, oh, these are her passions and this is the stuff she's done, it's easier to start that conversation. And for me, when I got selected to be a board member, it was so funny because the panelists, like literally I knew everybody except for 2 people on the board, just because I connected with one person and started hanging out and going to like different events and stuff. And next thing you know, a board position opens and everybody's like, of course it's Shiriqua. So stuff like that. And it comes from just keeping it real about who you are. Cause I'm like, and it was funny because literally when you were talking about board membership on the online course, I had the idea, I'm like, I want to be a board member of this company, of this organization. And then 1 year, 2 years later, I'm a board member because I'm like, hey, just straight up asking those questions. And they're like, of course, we thought about you. We didn't know, if this was something we we're going to do, but now that you bring it up, we're doing it and we have an opening. And also, do you want to bring anybody else along with you? I think that's a good part of just being connected to different people, whether they're like above you or with you, or, also I don't know if she's on this call, but there was another woman who was in the Black Girls for Social Work Facebook group, and she was asking about different MSW programs. And I'm like, hey, Fordham, and we're actually doing an alumni panel, here you go. So stuff like that, just always finding a way to
I think we lost Shiriqua.
Oh, dear.
Was bad. Oh.
I'm just going to read out Emily Turfer's question. Apologies if I didn't get the name exactly correct. She says, you're all doing such amazing work and thank you for sharing all your wisdom with us. Do you have any tips on working hard, working multiple jobs, practicing self-care, and making time for yourself?
I actually love this question just because of the nature of what I was doing for a few years as a primary caretaker to my dad, but also trying to build a business and doing other things in my life. It is so important to make time for yourself, and self-care, however you see that for yourself, it looks differently for everyone. But I'm like trying to speak this out loud so that I actually can hopefully relay it to people, because I would tell myself this all the time when I was taking care of my dad and didn't really factor it in too much. But little things make a difference. If you are working remotely and you're not in person and you're kind of behind a screen all day, make it a point to go outside for 20 or 30 minutes and go for a walk. Set boundaries for yourself so that your job and your work-life balance is sustainable. Find things that make you feel relaxed and kind of bring you out of a focused zone and into something else, whether that is walking or exercise or journaling or painting, running, whatever it might be. You have to kind of find your way. And if you're not good about factoring it in on a day-to-day basis, set reminders in your phone or make it a part of your daily routine. Because if you keep going and going and going and you can't focus on yourself, you will run out of steam, and you will burn out, and that's just not sustainable. So I will say, I found my little things and I would implement them. In this new job I've had for a month, I'm trying to find my ways, and trying to take a step back when I feel like I'm overdoing it. Way easier said than done. Again, like I mentioned, I'm not great at this, but I'm learning every day. And I think if you have a perspective that you need to put yourself first and your mental health and your physical health, and really make it a point, then that's really the only way to kind of get through and sustain. So that's my view.
Yeah, I like that. I think my first recommendation is do a time study, right? A lot of times we talk about priorities and balance and all of these things, and it's like, it's just words, in my opinion, until you put some data behind it, right? Spend a week and see how you're spending your time. Are you on Netflix for 5 hours and not taking a lunch and spending 10 hours of your week commuting? Like, whatever it is, you have to have a baseline to start before you can start to build out what you want to do, right? I also think it's important to understand mental energy and when you have energy to do things. I am not a morning person in terms of complex tasks and strategic thinking. I can do administrative tasks early in the morning. So for me, self-care looks like kickboxing at 6:30, dropping my kids off, taking a leisurely walk, having my Starbucks, checking my email, doing whatever I need to do, because my brain is up and running by 10:30, right? So I don't schedule meetings before 10 a.m. I definitely don't schedule meetings on Fridays. I have a boundary plan in terms of what works for me, but I also don't mind checking email from 7 to 7:30 p.m. Like I do a half-hour block just to make sure that I didn't miss anything during the day. So you have to be ruthless with how you protect your time. It is your greatest asset. And also giving yourself some grace, right? Like, there are 3 different stages I think you have in your career. You have your climb years, your crawl years, and your coast years, right? And we all know this. We all have jobs. Some jobs you like, I know this like the back of my hand. I'm showing up, I'm chilling, I'm good. And sometimes you are working for that check. Like, you are working to build your brand. Maybe you're trying to make it to the next level. And then your crawl years, right? Like, I'm not really trying to do anything new. I'm trying to get myself situated. So figure out what stage you're in, what space you're in terms of your career. Like I said, I have 2 children. So there was a 2-year period when my son, my second child, when Langston was born to when he was 2 years old, that I wasn't as ambitious. I wasn't taking on as many projects, right? I was play date, mom, and consulting, and doing some things in between. So I really think it matters. It's more about integration and how you're looking at things holistically, right? You might have 6 months where you're more tapped into your community or to X thing that you're doing that is outside of work, and some months that you're more heavy on the career focus side, and that's okay, right? Just don't want you to look at it day to day, week to week, month to month, like, oh, I'm failing as a mom, I'm failing as a student, I'm failing as a whatever. I think we put way too much pressure on the balance piece to even out in a short span of time, like focus on integration.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just had a quick question. I know that we're running out of time, and I'm so sad that we have to close this session. You know, it's 8:28 and we round up at 8:30. I was just going to ask a quick question, and I was just going to ask if you all have any advice for us again as fresh graduates leaving grad school, and there's a lot of like anxiety and worry about getting a job. And I'll just use myself as an example. I do have like a job offer that I personally do not. I know Jason had mentioned, I don't know what your experience, we probably might chat about this offline or whatever, but your experience, why you do not like policy jobs. But, it's a policy-based job. And I know that I in the macro field is kind of hard to navigate. I know that I don't want to do clinical work, but I'm not like settled about where I want to be in like the macro field. It's a policy-based job. So it's like, it's very political. I know that I don't want to be in the political space. So, but everyone is like, take the job. And I also don't want to be like out of grad school and not have a job and be frustrated. So it's like, what do you advise for people that are out? And it's like, do you just take any job that just comes to you, or do you just wait out until you get what you really deserve? And in the meantime, what do you do? Like, what is that like, and it just kind of ties down to like your experience after you like left grad school and, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think you also, you're figuring it out, right? Like some people know exactly what they want to do and they go for it. Some people are learning, right? And you want to get that experience. Like you might like, so the reason I say, but not policy work per se, right? But like politics in general, the reason I say that I know that's probably not the best fit for me is because I've seen enough at this point to know that like sometimes there isn't a real authentic investment in the work that needs to happen. And so that for me, as somebody who comes from the community that oftentimes is being centered, it's a challenge, right? Because I'm like, not only do I know the work and have the lived experience, I know the research. So it's tough when certain people who have power to make change don't actually try to make that change. So I say all that to say, social workers like us here, right, tend to actually want to make that change. They care about it. And if you're in a position to write policy or get involved in understanding how that works, there's a rich experience in that. Right? Policies is going to be in any company or organization you work with or for, right? So I think that we need people in policy. I just know what my strengths are. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's kind of my stance on it. But I do think like if you're interested in it and this is something like, it's one of your first jobs out of your graduate program, like check it out, give it a chance, see what it's like. If you have that interest. Right, that might change next year. You might, go through the job and be like, this ain't what I thought. And at the same time, find the people Genisha was talking about, right? Find the mentors, find the people that work there who can tell you, who are a little bit more seasoned, who can tell you this is what this policy life is like. And then you're gonna quickly learn. So because you have that social work background, you have a different lens of understanding of how things should happen and what your approach to the work is. You're gonna find that as you're doing your work, people may have conflicting views to yours or just a different approach, for better or for worse, right? and you're gonna start to uncover what's really happening in this policy work, and then you're gonna decide, like, can I make a change here? Is this something I'm enjoying? And if so, then you may want to build in that, or you may uncover that, like, I don't think this is it. If I still like policy, can I impact policy just in a different way? It may not have to be there per se. So that's my thinking around this. And yeah, I'll pause there. I don't know if other folks have other thoughts.
Yeah, so I graduated May 2021, and I'm starting my first official full-time job May 9th. So it took a whole year, but I'm in a position where I'm able to live in New York and not work full-time and still be okay. Not everybody is like that. So you just really have to figure out what you can do financially, and like we were saying, what you can do like with the mental load and everything else that you have going on, as well as making sure whoever you're working with is going to align with you. Because I've also, especially because I'm in the military and veteran work, everybody sort of pushed me to the policy side. And I'm like, especially with everything going on, I'm like, I know I don't want to work with certain people right now. I don't have it in me. So I'll think about that, revisit that another year or so from now. But right now, to make money, what do I want to do? What's available? Who's doing fun stuff? So now I'm going into that, and it's just always keeping your options open, making sure that you're subscribed to a bunch of different coalitions or anything that has a big network of people and groups and stuff, because they will send out different jobs and stuff, whether it's short term or not. And that's just my spiel on it.
Yeah, just to echo that as well. This time last year, like I was so stressed out about finding a job as I was like, you know, about to graduate in May, and just like, I don't recommend it at all. You know, try to just like stay calm, believe in yourself. You know, you've gotten this far, like you're going to be awesome at whatever you do, and trust the process. Don't settle for something that you don't feel comfortable with. If you are getting offered a salary that you think is too low, don't accept it. And then, because it's just not going to work out. You know, you could feel resentment in the long term. Believe in yourself. If you think you can do better, then you probably can, you know? So yeah, that's my two cents. Like, try not to stress too much. Y'all are doing awesome. So keep doing awesome.
Sorry, just to add, you have an MSW or a degree from Fordham, and especially in New York, that means something. You will be good with jobs, especially people who want to work in nonprofit, just in general, like people need social workers. So you'll be good. You'll have a job when you want one. Jobs are out there. Don't stress out.
The other thing I'll say is, like, nothing is the end of the world, right? I've been laid off from jobs. I told you I had pay cut, terrible bosses, whatever. You always come out on the other end of it. And so if you just think about it from that perspective of like, take the risk, take the chance, don't always look for like, oh, but it has to be perfect. Because you're gonna, you know, like you're gonna spin your wheels and drive yourself crazy. But like, what is really the worst case scenario if you get to a job and 6 months later, you hate it? Like, that's why it's called a career path and a career journey. It happens. It happens far more than you think, right? Everyone on this call talked about having 5 to 7 different jobs, right? So you're starting out, great if you find the place you love and manager you love for 20 years, like, applause if that is your testimony and that happens for you. But more often than not, you get somewhere, you get what you need out of that organization, and you move on, right? Like, that's the building of it until you figure out what you want to do. So take risk. Like, this is the opportunity in your career. I wish I had taken more risk. I wish I had been more bold in my career search that first 3 to 5 years, right? Like, then I had to start making, you know, some decisions around family and like relocation. I can't just pick up and move and go somewhere now. But if you are in a position to like live anywhere, and try any field and you're not really tied down to things and there's like social work components of the work, I say take the risk.
Wow, this has just really been excellent. Thank you so much to everyone for coming. We really, really appreciate all of the advice and the insight that you've given, and just thank you for coming and sharing your experience with us. I know this has been really helpful for me, especially that advice to just trust the process. I think it just needs to be repeated over and over, like, 'cause there is that anxiety when you're graduating. So thank you so much again. And thank you to everyone who came. We're so appreciative of you as well and for asking your questions. And I saw that we some folks put their LinkedIn and stuff in the chat so that you can continue to reach out to them. Thank you so much again. If you are interested in Student Congress, we put the info sheet up at the beginning, but I'll post it again, and you could always feel free to reach out to us. Our email is on there. And we'll post the recording on the GSS YouTube channel, hopefully in the next week or so. So thank you so much again.
Thank you, everybody.